12 years, no handshakes, no hugs, no mercy. Zion could survive a bullet without blinking, but one single brush of skin from another person would shatter him from the inside out. Until a young woman broke every rule during a blackout, pressed her bare hand against his chest, and gave him the first silence he had felt in over a decade. Once upon a time, in the shadow, drenched mountains of upstate New York, there stood a fortress made of glass and steel, the kind of place the criminal world whispered about but never approached. Inside that fortress lived a man everyone feared, everyone respected, and no one dared to name out loud. His name was Zion Seo. People called him the Shadow King, the untouchable emperor of the most powerful crime empire on the entire East Coast, because for 12 years, no one had been able to touch him. Not family, not allies, not the women who threw themselves at his feet, not a handshake, not a brush of fingers, not even the graze of fabric against his skin without serious consequences. But very few people knew why he lived that way. They only knew the surface, a ruthless crime boss who had men executed for standing too close, a billionaire who wore custom, lined gloves even in the middle of summer. A ghost living inside a glass house. The truth was so much darker. Zion was not born broken. He was not born cold. He was born sharp and clever, with a laugh that made his father proud, and a heart that had not yet learned to distrust the world. When he was younger, he loved running through his family's estate. He loved the weight of his father's hand on his shoulder. He loved believing that loyalty and blood meant something real. But everything shattered the year his half, brother Jin, came home from military school. Jin was older, colder, hungry in a way that made the air around him taste like metal. He smiled with too many teeth. And he watched Zion the way a wolf watches a wounded deer. Their father had always said the crime empire would go to the son, who proved himself worthy. Jin decided that worthiness was something you could steal. It started small, whispers in their father's ear. Lies about Zion's judgment, forged documents suggesting betrayal. But Zion was loved and protected. So Jin did what predators do when they cannot break their prey from the outside. He broke him from within. There was a woman. Her name was Mira. She had honeyed words and deep, convincing eyes. And Zion, young and still foolish in the way only people who have never been truly hurt can be, believed her when she said she loved him. He did not know Jin had sent her. He did not know every kiss was surveillance, every whispered secret a weapon handed to his enemy. The night it happened, Zion was 20, 3 years old. Mira lured him to a warehouse on the edge of the city. She said she had something to show him, something that would prove his father's enemies were moving against him. Zion went because he trusted her, because he was still a man who believed in love. The lights inside were blinding. White and surgical, Jin was waiting too. They strapped Zion to a metal chair in the center of a white room. Jin stood in the doorway, backlit like something from a nightmare, and smiled. "You were always father's favorite," Jin said. "Let's see if he still loves you when you're too broken to lead." What came next was not torture for information. It was torture for transformation. Electroshock therapy over and over, designed not to kill but to rewire. Jin had hired a rogue scientist, someone who understood pain, empathy, and the fragile wiring of the human nervous system. They did not just hurt Zion, they reprogrammed him. They took his ability to feel empathy, his mirror neurons, and turned them into a weapon against himself. By the time they were done, Zion's brain could no longer tell the difference between his own pain and someone else's. Every touch from another human being transmitted their physical agony, their emotional damage, directly into his body. A handshake felt like broken glass under his skin. A hug felt like drowning. They called it tactile mirror pain. Zion called it hell. Jin left him there, left him screaming in a white room with burn marks on his wrists and a nervous system that would never forgive him for surviving. Mira never came back. She had already been paid. By the time Zion's father found him 3 days later, the damage was permanent. Irreversible, Zion could barely stand to be in the same room as another person. His father wept. Jin played the concerned brother. And Zion learned what it truly meant to be alone. He did not break, though. He evolved. Over the next decade, Zion became something else entirely. He took his father's empire and expanded it deep into the shadows of America. He built a syndicate that operated through messengers, through technology, through fear alone. He never had to touch his enemies. He never had to. His reputation did the killing for him. He moved into a fortress in the mountains. A cold, modern mansion of glass walls and steel beams that reflected nothing but isolation. He wore gloves lined with medical-grade fabric. He kept a 3-foot distance around himself at all times. His staff knew the rules. Never look him in the eye. Never enter a room he already occupies. And God help you, never ever touch him. People called him a monster. He let them. It was easier than explaining that he was just a man whose body had become a prison. But money could not buy him peace. Power could not silence the noise inside his head. Every day was a battle against the phantom pain of being near other people. Every night, he sat alone in his glass tower and wondered if this was all his life would ever be, until her. Far away from Zion's world of glass and silence, there lived a young woman named Vivian Cole. She did not grow up in mansions. She grew up in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx where the heat only worked half the winter, and the neighbors' arguments bled right through the walls. She learned early that life did not owe you fairness. It only gave you choices. Vivian's father disappeared when she was 8. Her mother worked 2 jobs and still could not keep the lights on consistently. By the time Vivian turned 14, she was the one working, cleaning offices after school, babysitting on weekends, selling whatever she could to make sure her younger brother stayed fed. But Vivian was not bitter. She was steady, calm. She moved through the world like water, quiet, persistent, and impossible to break. People always said there was something peaceful about her, like she carried her own gravity. When her brother Marcus was hit by a car at 17 and lost the use of his legs, Vivian made a promise. She would take care of him no matter what it cost. So when the hospital bills piled up and her mother's health started failing, Vivian did what she always did. She found a way. She saw a job listing for a live-in estate worker at a private residence upstate. The pay was more money than she had ever seen in her life. The requirements were strange, but the listing was clear. Discretion required. No previous experience necessary. Must be comfortable working in complete isolation. Everyone told her not to apply. They said the man who owned that estate was dangerous. A recluse, a killer maybe, but Vivian had been around dangerous men her whole life. She knew how to make herself invisible. She needed the money, so she applied. The day Vivian entered the glass fortress, her breath caught in her throat. The mansion was a masterpiece of cold beauty, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking snow, dusted pine trees. Furniture that looked like it had been carved from marble and shadow. Everything was pristine and untouched, like a museum where nothing was allowed to actually live. The house manager, a stern woman named Mrs. Park, gave her the rules immediately. You are here to clean, to maintain, to be invisible. Mr. CO does not tolerate mistakes. Mrs. Park's eyes were hard. You will never touch him. You will never approach him without being summoned. If he enters a room, you leave. If he speaks, you answer briefly and respectfully. Do you understand? Vivian nodded. She was used to rules. Her whole life had been rules. And one more thing. Mrs. Park leaned in closer, her voice dropping to just above a whisper. If you value your life, you will never, ever make physical contact with him. The last person who did. She did not finish the sentence. She did not have to. Vivian felt a chill crawl up her spine, but she did not flinch. She just nodded again. Then he walked in. Zion entered the room like a shadow given human form, tall, impossibly still. His face was the kind of beautiful that felt dangerous. Sharp jaw, dark eyes that seemed to see straight through skin and bone, black hair swept back with surgical precision. He wore all black with gloves. Vivian immediately stepped back and lowered her gaze the way Mrs. Park had instructed. But she could feel him looking at her, studying her. The air between them seemed to hum with something she could not name. "Is she the new hire?" Zion's voice was low and controlled, like he was used to every word carrying weight. "Yes, sir," Mrs. Park replied. Vivian did not dare look up. She focused on the floor, on her breathing, on staying as completely still as possible. Then Zion did something no one expected. He took a step closer. Mrs. Park tensed. Vivian's heart hammered in her chest. Zion stared at her for a long, unbearable moment. And then, for the first time in weeks, he felt something strange. The noise inside his head quieted. Just a little, just enough to notice. He frowned, studied her face, her posture, the way she did not tremble even though she clearly should have. "Keep her," he said finally. Mrs. Park blinked in genuine surprise. "Sir, I said keep her." His eyes never left Vivian. "She stays," and with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Vivian standing in the center of the cold glass room, her heart pounding, her mind spinning. She had no idea she had just become the only person in 12 years who made Zion feel something other than pain. She had no idea her life had just changed forever. The first week, Vivian learned to move like a ghost. She woke before dawn, when the sky was still bruised purple and frost clung to the windows like lace. She cleaned in silence, her footsteps swallowed by thick rugs with patterns rich and endless. She learned which rooms Zion used and which ones he avoided. She learned the rhythm of his isolation, hours behind a locked office door, meals eaten alone, that strange nightly habit of standing at the east, facing window. She never spoke to him, he never spoke to her, but she felt him watching, always watching, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he did not know how to name. The other staff kept their distance from her too, the cook, the groundskeeper, the night security guard. They all treated her like she was contagious, like being noticed by Zion was some kind of disease you could catch from standing too close to someone he had already looked at. But Vivian did not mind the silence. She had spent her whole life being invisible. On the 8th day, something shifted. Vivian was dusting the library, a massive room lined floor to ceiling with books in languages she could not read, leather spines gleaming like dark jewels. She heard the door open behind her and froze. According to the schedule Mrs. Park had given her, Zion was not supposed to be in this wing until after 2 in the afternoon. It was barely noon. She did not turn around, did not move, just held her breath and waited for him to leave, but he did not leave. She heard his footsteps, slow and deliberate, the kind of walk that belonged to a man who had never had to hurry for anything in his life. He stopped somewhere near the center of the room. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her back like something physical. Something pressing between her shoulder blades. Minutes passed, or maybe it was only seconds. Time felt strange in his presence. Stretched thin and fragile, finally his voice cut through the silence, low, controlled. "You don't flinch." Vivian's hand tightened around the cloth she was holding. She kept her eyes on the bookshelf in front of her, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Sir, the others flinch when I enter a room." There was no anger in his tone, only observation, cold and detached. "You don't." She did not know how to respond to that, did not know if it was a criticism or a compliment or something else entirely. So she said nothing. Another pause, then quieter, almost to himself, interesting. The door closed. He was gone. Vivian exhaled slowly, her hands trembling. She pressed her palm flat against the bookshelf to steady herself, feeling the cool leather spines beneath her fingertips. She did not understand what had just happened, did not understand why he had stayed, why he had spoken to her at all. But something in the air had changed. She could feel it, thick and electric like pressure building before a storm. That night she lay awake in the small room Mrs. Park had given her on the 3rd floor, a space barely big enough for a bed and a dresser, but clean and warm and hers. She stared at the ceiling and thought about the way Zion had looked at her, not with desire, not with curiosity or suspicion, but with something else, something that felt like recognition, like he had seen something in her that he had not expected to find. She did not know if that was a good thing or a dangerous one. The days that followed were strange. Zion did not seek her out, but he stopped avoiding her. She would enter a room to clean and find him already there, reading, working on his laptop, and he would not leave. He would just glance at her once, nod slightly, and continue whatever he had been doing. As if her presence did not bother him, as if somehow it actually steadied him, Vivian learned to move around him carefully, keeping the required distance, never speaking unless spoken to. But she could not help noticing the small things. The way his jaw tightened whenever he heard footsteps approaching in the hallway. The way his breathing slowed when she was in the room. Like her quietness gave him permission to breathe easier. The way he would remove his gloves when he thought she was not looking, flexing his fingers like they ached. She noticed the gloves most of all. They were always black, always perfectly fitted, always there. Even when he ate, he wore them. One afternoon, while she was polishing the glass table in the drawing room, she found a pair discarded on the arm of the sofa. She picked them up carefully, examining the fabric, medical grade compression material lined with something soft and insulated. Those were custom made. Vivian nearly dropped them. She turned to find Zion standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Her pulse spiked. She immediately set the gloves back down and bowed her head. "I'm sorry, sir. It's fine." He crossed the room slowly, stopping exactly 3 feet away from her, close enough that she could see the dark circles under his eyes, the sharp lines of exhaustion carved into his face. "You were curious." She did not deny it. There was no point. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You haven't." He studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers like he was looking for something specific. Then quietly, "Do you know why I wear them?" Vivian hesitated. Mrs. Park had told her never to ask questions, never to pry, but he was the one offering, and something in his voice made her think he wanted to be asked. Needed to be. "No, sir." His lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "Because touch is poison to me. Every person carries their pain, their darkness, their sickness, and when I touch them, I feel it, all of it, like knives under my skin." He paused, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Old trauma, carefully controlled. "It's called tactile mirror pain. When I make skin contact with another person, my nervous system mirrors what they're feeling and amplifies it into physical agony. Their guilt feels like acid. Their anger feels like burning. Their sadness feels like drowning." The words were spoken so calmly, so matter-of-factly, that it took Vivian a moment to fully process them. When she did, her breath caught. "That sounds like hell." "It is." He picked up the gloves, turning them over in his hands. "It's been 12 years since I felt another person's skin without wanting to scream. 12 years since I could shake someone's hand or embrace someone," or he trailed off, his jaw tightening. "There are worse prisons than cells, Miss Cole." Vivian's chest tightened. She thought about her brother, about the way Marcus used to hug her so tight she could barely breathe, back before the accident. She thought about what it would feel like to lose that, to have every single touch turned into a weapon. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and she meant it completely. Zion's gaze snapped to hers. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe disbelief. As if no one had ever said those 2 words to him before. Then it was gone, replaced by that familiar mask of cold control. "Don't pity me," he said quietly. "Pity is just another kind of poison." He left the room before she could respond, his gloves still clutched in his hand. That night the storm came. Vivian stood at her window, watching the sky turn that strange, sickly green that always came before the worst weather. She had loved storms once. Growing up in the Bronx, she used to sit by the window during summer thunderstorms and watch the rain turn the streets into rivers, the lightning illuminating the whole city in sharp electric bursts. But she had a feeling this storm would be different. In the small kitchen of the staff wing, she overheard the cook talking quietly to the groundskeeper. She did not catch all of it, but she caught one name, Jin. Mrs. Park appeared in the doorway, her face tight. "Mr. Seo's half," Brother is visiting at the end of the month. When he's here, you stay out of sight. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. I mean it, Miss Cole, Jin is. Mrs. Park hesitated, choosing her words carefully. He's dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with violence. Stay invisible. The warning settled in Vivian's stomach like swallowed ice. The storm hit just after midnight with the fury of something alive and deeply angry. Vivian was in her room, lying in bed with her eyes wide open, listening to the wind howl against the glass like it wanted to tear the building apart. The first crack of thunder was so loud it rattled the windows in their frames. She sat up, her heart pounding. Outside, the sky had turned that bruised, ugly green. The trees bent nearly sideways under the force of the wind. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Vivian reached for her phone, using the dim glow to navigate to the door. The hallway was pitch black, the emergency lights apparently on the same failed circuit. She could hear the storm raging outside, the sound of something, branches, debris, slamming against the side of the house with enough force to crack stone. She should stay in her room. That was the smart thing to do. Wait for the generators to kick in. Wait for morning. But then she heard it, a sound that did not belong to the storm. A low, guttural noise that might have been a groan or a gasp or something worse. It was coming from the second floor. Vivian did not think. She just moved. Her phone's flashlight cut through the darkness as she hurried down the stairs. Her bare feet silent on the cold marble. The sound came again, louder this time, more desperate, and she followed it to the east wing hallway. That is where she found him. Zion was on the floor, his back against the wall, his body convulsing like he was being electrocuted. His gloves were off, lying a few feet away, and his bare hands were clawing at the carpet, at his chest, at his own face. His eyes were open but unseeing, his mouth twisted in a silent scream. Blood trickled from his nose. His skin had gone gray. Vivian dropped to her knees beside him, her phone clattering to the floor. Mr. Seo. He did not respond, did not even seem to hear her. His whole body was locked in spasm, every muscle rigid, his breathing coming in short, shallow gasps that sounded like someone drowning. She had seen seizures before. Marcus had them sometimes after the accident, when the scar tissue in his brain misfired. But this was different. This was not just neurological. This was pure, unfiltered agony radiating off him in waves. The storm, the sensory overload, the thunder and lightning must have triggered something in his already hypersensitive nervous system. Without thinking, Vivian grabbed his wrists, trying to stop him from hurting himself. His skin was ice cold and slick with sweat. She pinned his hands to the floor, leaning her weight over him. Mr. Seo, listen to me. You need to breathe, just breathe. His eyes found hers. For a second there was recognition, terror, and then his body convulsed again, harder this time, and she felt him try to pull away. But she did not let go. She could not. He was going to hurt himself, break something, choke, so she did the one thing Mrs. Park had told her never, ever to do. She pressed her bare hand against his forehead. The reaction was immediate. Zion went completely still, not the stillness of unconsciousness, the stillness of pure shock. His eyes widened, locked onto hers, and Vivian watched as something impossible happened. The pain in his expression dissolved. The tension in his body unwound. His breathing, which had been ragged and desperate just seconds ago, evened out into something slow and deep. He stared at her like he had seen a ghost. Why? His voice was barely above a whisper. Why does it not burn? Vivian did not understand the question. Her hand was still on his forehead, her pulse racing, her mind spinning. What? Your touch. His eyes searched hers, wild and completely disbelieving. It doesn't hurt. She did not know what to say to that. Did not know if she should pull away or stay exactly where she was. So she stayed, and slowly, carefully, Zion reached up and wrapped his bare fingers around her wrist. His grip was gentle, testing, like he expected the pain to arrive any second, and he was already bracing for it. But it did not come. Vivian could see the disbelief spreading across his face, followed by something that looked dangerously close to hope. I don't understand, he whispered. Neither did she, but she could feel his pulse beneath her fingertips, racing and erratic, slowly beginning to calm. She could feel the warmth of his skin, the faint tremor running through him, and she realized suddenly that this was the simplest thing in the world. Just one person reaching out to another in the dark. The lights flickered back on. The generator had finally kicked in, bathing the hallway in pale emergency light. Zion was still staring at her, his hand still wrapped around her wrist, his expression raw and completely unguarded in a way she had never seen before. Don't let go. It was not a command. It was a plea, so Vivian did not let go. She stayed there on the floor beside him, her hand on his forehead, his fingers circling her wrist, while the storm raged on outside and something fundamental shifted between them. She did not know what it meant, did not know what would happen when the storm ended and reality returned. But for now, in the darkness with the world falling apart around them, Zion, the untouchable Shadow King, was holding on to her like she was the only thing keeping him connected to the earth. And maybe in that moment she was. They stayed like that for nearly an hour. His breathing gradually returned to normal, his grip on her wrist loosening but never releasing. Outside, the storm began to exhaust itself, the thunder growing distant, the wind dying down to a low moan. Finally he spoke. How is this possible? Vivian shook her head slowly. I don't know. You should hurt me. Everyone hurts me. Their emotions, their pain. It all transfers through touch like electricity. But you... He lifted his other hand, the one that was not holding her wrist, and carefully touched her cheek. His fingers trembled. You feel like silence. She did not know how to respond to that, did not know how to explain something she did not fully understand herself. Can you stand? She asked softly. He nodded, but when he tried to move, his legs would not cooperate. The seizure had taken everything out of him. Vivian shifted, wrapping his arm around her shoulders, helping him to his feet. He leaned heavily against her, and she felt the full weight of him. Solid, warm, devastatingly real, they made their way slowly to his private quarters. Vivian had never been allowed inside before, but he guided her through the doors with a key card from his pocket. The room was exactly what she had expected. Minimalist, expensive, cold, a massive bed with black silk sheets, floor to ceiling windows overlooking the mountains. Art on the walls that looked curated for royalty, each piece glowing under soft, expensive lighting. She helped him to the bed, and he sank onto it, his head falling back against the pillows. He still had not let go of her wrist. You should rest, Vivian said. I'll get Mrs. Park. No. His grip tightened. Don't leave, please. The vulnerability in his voice stopped her completely. This was not the Shadow King. This was just a man who had been drowning in isolation for 12 years and had finally found something that felt like air. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. She sat on the edge of the bed, and Zion shifted, resting his head in her lap. The gesture was so intimate and so trusting that it made her chest physically ache. She carefully placed her hand on his temple, feeling his pulse beneath her fingers, slow and steady. Tell me about yourself, he murmured. I want to hear your voice. So she did. She told him about growing up in the Bronx, about Marcus and the accident that had left him unable to walk. She told him about her mother, who worked double shifts and still could not afford her own medications. She told him about the mold in their apartment and the landlord who never came, and the scholarship she had lost when she had to drop out of community college to work full-time. He listened without interrupting, his eyes closed, his breathing deep and even, and when she finished, he said quietly, You're stronger than you know. I'm just surviving. That's what strength is. Surviving when giving up would be easier. They fell into comfortable silence. Outside, the storm had finally passed, leaving the world washed clean and quiet. His breathing had evened out into sleep, but his hands still rested on her knee, maintaining contact even while unconscious. Vivian knew she should leave, knew that staying here crossed every professional line that existed, but she could not bring herself to move. could not bring herself to break the connection that seemed to be keeping him peaceful, so she stayed. And somewhere in the early hours of morning, she fell asleep too, her hand still resting on his temple. Their breathing synchronized in the darkness. When Mrs. Park found them at dawn, the older woman's face went carefully blank. But she did not scold, did not lecture. She just looked at Vivian with something that might have been understanding. "Mr. CO wants to see you in his office, 10 o'clock. Vivian's stomach dropped. This was it, the firing.
The end. She nodded and slipped out of the room, careful not to wake him. She expected to be fired.
Or worse, she had broken the one rule that mattered above all the others. She had touched him, and even though he had asked her not to let go, even though he had held her wrist for nearly an hour until the seizure fully passed, she knew that in the cold light of day, things would be different. She dressed quickly, pulled her hair back, made her way down the stairs. The house looked pristine, as if the storm had never happened. Windows cleaned, debris cleared, every surface gleaming, as if the world had simply reset itself overnight. But Vivian knew better. Some things, once broken, do not go back to the way they were. Mrs. Park stopped outside the heavy oak door of Zion's office, knocked twice, and left without another word. Vivian stood alone in the hallway, her hands trembling slightly. A voice from inside called, "Enter." She pushed the door open. The office was enormous. Floor, the ceiling, windows overlooking snow, dusted mountains. Dark wood furniture that looked centuries old. Walls lined with art that Vivian suspected was worth more than her entire life put together. And behind a massive, dark desk sat Zion, dressed in a crisp black shirt, his gloves back in place, his expression as controlled and unreadable as ever. Vivian closed the door behind her and stood just inside, keeping her eyes lowered. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. She waited for the accusation, the dismissal, the anger. Instead, Zion said quietly, "Sit." She looked up, startled. He gestured to the chair across from his desk, not across the table, but right beside him. Close, she sat, folded her hands in her lap, and finally met his gaze. His dark eyes were studying her with that same intense focus from the night before. But now there was something else layered beneath it. Confusion, and something that looked almost like hunger. "You saved my life," he said finally. Vivian blinked. "I just did what anyone would know." His voice was sharp, cutting through her deflection. Anyone else would have called for help, kept their distance, followed the rules. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers pressed together beneath his chin. "You broke every rule I've set for this household. Do you understand how serious that is?" Her throat tightened. "Yes, sir. And yet you did it anyway." She did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Zion was quiet for a long moment, his gaze never leaving hers. Then he stood, moving around the desk with that same calm, predatory grace she had noticed the very first day. He stopped a few feet away from her, closer than he had ever stood when he was not in the grip of a seizure. Close enough that she could smell the faint scent of cedar and something darker, something that reminded her of smoke. "I need you to understand something, Miss Cole." His voice had dropped lower, more intimate. "What happened last night was impossible. For 12 years, I have not been able to tolerate human touch without experiencing excruciating pain. I feel what others feel, their guilt, their rage, their sorrow, amplified into physical agony." He paused, and she saw his jaw tighten. "It's not in my head, it's neurological. My condition was caused by prolonged nerve trauma combined with electric shock conditioning. My empathic responses were weaponized, turned inward." Another pause, longer this time, and then you touched me, and I felt nothing, not pain, not corruption. He said the next word like it was sacred. Just silence. He said it like it was something he had been searching for his entire life, and had finally, impossibly found. "I don't know why it works with you. I don't know if it's permanent or temporary, or if it will disappear as suddenly as it appeared. But I need to know if it happens again." He paused, and Vivian saw something vulnerable flicker across his face. "I need you to stay close." Her heart was pounding now. What are you asking me to do? I'm promoting you. You'll no longer be a cleaner. You'll be my personal attendant. You'll accompany me to meetings, appointments, every part of my day where I might be in proximity to other people. His jaw tightened slightly. Your presence seems to dampen the effect, even when we're not touching. When you're near me, the noise gets quieter. Vivian's mind was spinning. This was insane. She was not qualified to be anyone's personal attendant. She barely knew how to navigate this world of wealth and violence and power. But then she thought about Marcus, about the bills piling up, about the fact that Mrs. Park had already mentioned the salary for this position would be triple what she was currently making. And if I refuse, the words were out before she could stop them. Zion's expression did not change. But something dangerous flickered in his eyes. You won't. It was not a threat. It was a certainty. And Vivian realized with a chill running down her spine that he was right. She would not refuse, could not refuse. Not just because of the money, but because something in her recognized the desperation underneath his voice. The same desperation she heard in her own voice when she begged hospital staff for payment extensions. "When do I start?" she asked quietly. The tension in Zion's shoulders eased slightly. Immediately, "Mrs. Park will brief you on the schedule, but there's one more thing." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver access card. "This gives you clearance to every room in this house, including my private quarters. There may be times when I need you close without any warning. Do you understand?" Vivian took the card. The metal cold against her palm. "Yes, sir. Good." He turned away, moving back to his desk, and just like that, the moment of vulnerability was gone. He was the Shadow King again, cold, controlled, untouchable. That will be all. Vivian stood, her legs unsteady, and walked to the door, but before she could open it, his voice stopped her. "Miss Cole." She turned back. He was watching her again, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for last night." The words were stiff, awkward, like he was not used to saying them. Like gratitude was a foreign language he had long forgotten how to speak. Vivian nodded once and left, closing the door softly behind her. She did not realize until she was halfway down the hall that her hands were shaking. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of closeness and silence. Vivian learned the rhythms of Zion's world. The meetings conducted in cold conference rooms with men who looked at her like she was either a curiosity or a threat. The phone calls taken in rapid language she could not understand, but could feel the tension radiating from. The late nights when he worked until dawn and she sat in the corner of his office with a book, existing as a silent anchor. She learned that he was right. Her presence did something to him. Even from across a room, she could see the way his breathing eased when she entered, the way the sharp lines of pain around his eyes softened, the way he could tolerate being in the same space as his lieutenants without flinching, as long as she was somewhere nearby. She had become his human shield, his biological painkiller. His silence, and slowly, carefully, they began to touch more. It started small, his bare hand brushing hers when she handed him a document, his fingers grazing her shoulder when he needed to pass behind her chair. Each touch was an experiment, a test to see if the piece would hold, and it always did. But then it became something else. Something neither of them acknowledged out loud, but both of them felt. Late one night, after a particularly brutal meeting with a rival faction, Zion sat at his desk with his head in his hands, his gloves off, his whole body radiating exhaustion. Vivian had been reading in the corner, as she always did, but she could feel the weight of his fatigue pressing against her. Without thinking, she stood and crossed the room. She stopped behind his chair, hesitating only a moment, then placed her hands on his shoulders. Zion went completely still. But he did not pull away. Vivian felt the tension in his muscles, the knots of stress wound tight beneath her palms. Slowly, carefully, she began to work the tension away, her thumbs moving in circles along his shoulder blades. A low sound escaped his throat, something between a groan and a sigh. His head dropped forward, and Vivian felt him surrender to her touch in a way that felt dangerously intimate. "Does this hurt?" she asked softly. No. His voice was rough, strained. It feels like, God, it feels like being human again. Her hand stilled for a moment. Then she continued, working her way up to the base of his neck, feeling the way his breathing deepened, the way his pulse slowed beneath her fingertips. They stayed like that for a long time. The only sound was the distant hum of the house and the soft whisper of her hands. Finally, Zion reached up and caught her wrist, stopping her. He turned in his chair and looked up at her with eyes that were too dark and too intense. You should go get some rest. It was not what he wanted to say. Vivian could see it in the way his fingers tightened around her wrist, the way his gaze lingered on her face, like he was memorizing every detail. But she nodded and stepped back. Breaking the contact, "Good night, Mr. CO. Zion." The word was quiet, almost reluctant. "When we're alone, you can call me Zion." Vivian's breath caught. It felt like a gift, a dangerous and intimate gift she should not accept, but absolutely could not refuse. "Good night, Zion." She left before she could see the way his expression crumbled the moment the door closed, before she could see him press his bare hand to the spot where hers had been, chasing the warmth she had left behind. In the hallway, Vivian leaned against the wall, her heart racing. She pressed her palm flat against her chest, trying to calm the storm building inside her. This was dangerous, not just because of the world he lived in, but because of what she was starting to feel every time he looked at her, every time he said her name, every time his skin met hers and the whole world fell away. She was becoming addicted to being his silence, and she had a terrible feeling that he was becoming addicted to her. The next day, Jin arrived. Vivian was in the library, organizing files for Zion's afternoon meetings, when she heard the commotion in the entrance hall. Voices raised in greeting, the kind of false warmth that signals danger to anyone paying attention. She moved to the doorway, staying in the shadows, and watched as Zion came down the main staircase to meet his half-brother. Jin was handsome in a way that felt completely wrong, too polished, too perfect, like a snake wearing human skin. He smiled as he approached Zion, but his eyes were calculating and cold. "Little brother," Jin said. "You look well." Zion's voice was carefully neutral. "I wasn't expecting you. I was in the area, thought I'd check in. The elders are asking questions about your health." Jin's gaze swept the room and landed directly on Vivian. His smile widened. "And who is this? My personal attendant. Interesting." Jin took a step toward her, and Vivian felt something predatory in his approach. "I don't recall you keeping staff so close before. Things change." "Indeed they do." Jin circled her slowly, and Vivian forced herself to stay completely still, to keep her expression blank. "What's your name?" "Vivian Cole, sir." "American, how refreshing." He reached out as if to touch her shoulder, and Zion moved faster than she had ever seen him move. His hand, still gloved, caught Jin's wrist. "Don't." Jin raised an eyebrow. "Protective, are we? She's mine. You don't touch what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice sent heat through Vivian's chest. Jin must have felt it too, because his smile turned sharp. "Of course. My apologies." He pulled his hand back. "I wouldn't dream of overstepping." But as Jin walked away, Vivian caught the look he threw over his shoulder. Calculating, interested, dangerous, Mrs. Park had been right. Jin was dangerous in ways that had absolutely nothing to do with physical violence. That night, after Jin had retired to the guest wing, Zion summoned Vivian to his private quarters. She found him standing at the east-facing window, staring out at the mountains, his gloves off, his hands pressed against the cold glass. "He knows," Zion said quietly. "He saw the way I reacted, the way I protected you. He knows you're different. Is that a problem? It's a vulnerability, and Jin collects vulnerabilities the way other people collect art." He turned to face her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was staggering. "I should send you away somewhere he can't reach you. But you won't." "No." His voice was rough. "I can't. I need you too much." Vivian crossed the room slowly, stopping when she was close enough to feel the heat radiating off his body. "Then we deal with Jin together." He reached out, his bare hand cupping her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You don't understand what he's capable of." "Then tell me." So he did. He told her about the White Room, about Mira and her betrayal. about the way Jin had orchestrated everything to break him, to transform him into the perfect Ruthless heir their father had always wanted, about the 12 years he had spent building walls around himself, convinced that isolation was the only way to survive. And when he finished, Vivian took his face in both her hands and said, "He didn't break you. He just taught you how strong you are." Zion closed his eyes, and she felt him lean into her touch like a man dying of thirst who had finally found water. "You make me want to believe that. Then believe it." He opened his eyes, and the hunger in them made her breath catch. "Vivian, tell me to stop." "Stop what?" "This." He reached up with his free hand, his bare fingers brushing along her jawline, tilting her face up toward his. "Because if I start, I don't know if I'll be able to." Vivian crossed the room slowly, stopping when she was close enough to feel the heat radiating off his body. "Then we deal with Jin together." He reached out, his bare hand cupping her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You don't understand what he's capable of. Then tell me." So he did. He told her about the White Room, about Mira and her betrayal, about the way Jin had orchestrated everything to break him, to transform him into the perfect Ruthless heir their father had always wanted, about the 12 years he had spent building walls around himself, convinced that isolation was the only way to survive. And when he finished, Vivian took his face in both her hands and said, "He didn't break you. He just taught you how strong you are." Zion closed his eyes, and she felt him lean into her touch like a man dying of thirst who had finally found water. "You make me want to believe that. Then believe it." He opened his eyes, and the hunger in them made her breath catch. "Vivian, tell me to stop." "Stop what?" "This." He reached up with his free hand, his bare fingers brushing along her jawline, tilting her face up toward his. "Because if I start, I don't know if I'll be able to." Her heart was hammering so hard she was certain he could hear it. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous, that crossing this line would complicate everything, that she was an employee and he was her boss, and this could only end in ruin. But when she looked into his eyes, she did not see her boss. She saw a man who had been starving for human connection for over a decade, a man who had found something impossible in her touch, a man who was looking at her like she was the only real thing in a world made entirely of shadows. "Don't stop," she whispered. Zion closed the distance between them in a heartbeat. His lips met hers with desperate gentleness, like he was afraid she might disappear if he held on too tight. One hand cupped her face while the other wrapped around her waist and pulled her against him. Vivian's eyes fluttered closed. She had been kissed before, but never like this. Never with reverence and hunger tangled so tightly together. Never with the feeling that she was both saving someone and being saved at exactly the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zion rested his forehead against hers. "This is insane," he murmured. "I know. I could destroy you just by letting you close. I know. And you're still not running." Vivian opened her eyes and met his gaze. "I told you, I'm not going anywhere." He kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands moving through her hair, down her back, learning the shape of her through her clothes like he was memorizing her through touch alone. And Vivian let herself fall into it. Let herself forget about the dangerous world he lived in. Let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this impossible thing between them could be completely real. They moved from the window to his bed in a blur of warmth and whispered words. When they settled onto the black silk sheets, Zion pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes searching. "Are you sure?" Vivian answered by pulling him back down to her. The world narrowed to the feeling of his skin against hers, the sound of his breathing, the way he touched her like she was something precious and worth protecting. He mapped every part of her with his hands, his lips, as if committing her to memory, and she did the same, learning the landscape of his scars, the places that made him gasp, the way his body responded to hers with a hunger that felt like complete devotion. When they finally came together, it was with a tenderness that made her chest ache. He held her gaze the entire time, his fingers laced with hers, their bodies moving in perfect sync. And in that moment, Vivian understood what silence really meant. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something so deep and true that words become completely unnecessary. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her body curved against his arm draped possessively over her waist. She could feel his heartbeat against her back, steady and strong. "Stay," he murmured, his arm tightening. "Please, I'm not going anywhere," she whispered back. She felt him smile against her shoulder, and for a moment the world was perfect. But 3 floors below in the guest wing, Jin stood at his window with a phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and cold. "I need a full background check on Vivian Cole. Everything, where she came from, who she loves, what she fears." He paused. "Listening, and I need you to find something for me, a very specific type of poison, one that mimics natural causes." He ended the call and smiled at his own reflection in the dark glass. The anchor had been identified. Now it was time to cut the line. The dinner invitation came on a Thursday evening, delivered by Mrs. Park with an expression that suggested she deeply disapproved, but would never dare say so out loud. "Mr. Seo would like you to join him for dinner tonight, 8 o'clock, in the formal dining room." Vivian looked up from her book, startled. They had been sharing his bed for 3 nights now, but those had been private moments stolen in darkness. This felt different, public, a declaration. When Vivian returned to her quarters, she found a dress hanging on the back of her door. Deep emerald green silk that looked like it had been tailored specifically for her body. She ran her fingers over the fabric, her stomach fluttering with something between excitement and real apprehension. This was not professional. This crossed a line they had been carefully avoiding in the daylight hours, but she put the dress on anyway. At exactly 8 o'clock, Vivian came downstairs to find the formal dining room completely transformed. The long table that usually sat empty and austere was set for 2, candles flickering in crystal holders, soft music playing from hidden speakers. It looked like a scene from a movie, romantic and impossibly elegant and utterly terrifying. Zion stood near the windows, dressed in all black as always, but tonight without the gloves. His bare hands were clasped behind his back, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable. When he heard her enter, he turned, and for just a moment something unguarded flickered across his face. "You look beautiful." The words were simple, quiet, but they hit Vivian like something physical, stealing the breath from her lungs. "Thank you." He gestured to the chair at his right, not across the table from him, right beside him. "Close, please sit." The meal was prepared by the estate's cook, but Zion had clearly given very specific instructions. Each dish carefully chosen, nothing too heavy, comfort food elevated into art, roasted chicken with herbs, perfectly seasoned vegetables, warm bread that smelled like home. They ate in comfortable silence at first. Then Zion spoke, his voice low and almost hesitant. "I wanted to thank you properly for everything these past weeks." Vivian set down her fork, her heart beating faster. "You don't need to thank me. It's my job." "No." He turned to look at her, his dark eyes intense. "It stopped being just a job the night you saved me. You could have walked away, collected what you were owed and disappeared, but you stayed." She did not know what to say to that. Did not know how to explain that leaving had never felt like an option. That something in her had recognized something in him, and walking away would have felt like abandoning a part of herself. "I wanted to stay," she said softly. Zion held her gaze for a long moment. Then slowly, deliberately, he reached across the small distance between them and took her hand. His bare fingers intertwined with hers, warm and sure and devastating. "I haven't had a meal with another person in 12 years, he admitted. "I'd forgotten what it felt like to not eat alone." Vivian's chest tightened. She squeezed his hand gently, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. "You're not alone anymore." Something shifted in his expression, something that looked dangerously close to hope. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a soft, reverent kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned and courtly, and it made her feel like the floor had disappeared from beneath her feet completely. They finished the meal like that, hands linked on the table between them, speaking in quiet voices about everything and nothing. Vivian told him about Marcus, about her childhood, about her mother, who worked herself to exhaustion. Zion listened like every single word mattered, his thumb tracing absent circles on the back of her hand. And then he told her things he had never told anyone, about the White Room, about Mira and the betrayal that had rewired him, about the way he had built his empire, not out of ambition, but out of pure necessity. Because if he was powerful enough, untouchable enough, maybe no one could ever hurt him again. But power doesn't fix this, he said quietly, gesturing to himself. It just makes the cage more comfortable. Vivian turned her hand in his, lacing their fingers together more firmly. You're not in a cage anymore. His eyes met hers, dark and hungry and achingly open. Aren't I? Before she could answer, he stood, pulling her gently to her feet. They were standing so close now that Vivian could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the cedar and smoke scent of him, could see the faint scar along his jawline she had never noticed before. Vivian, her name on his lips was a prayer and a confession. I need you to understand something. What I feel for you terrifies me, because everyone I've ever cared about has either betrayed me or been taken from me. And if Jin realizes how much you mean to me, he'll use you to destroy me. Then we don't let him realize it. He already suspects, the way I reacted when he tried to touch you, the fact that I'm keeping you close. His jaw tightened. He's been making calls, having you investigated. I have people watching him, but I can't stop him without revealing that I know. Fear flickered through Vivian's chest. What does he want? Everything, the syndicate, my power, my suffering. Zion cupped her face with both hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. He won't stop until he's taken everything from me, and now that includes you. So what do? We survive together. He leaned down, resting his forehead against hers, and we trust each other completely. No matter what happens. Can you do that? Yes. He kissed her then, slow and deep, pouring every unspoken fear and promise into the contact, and Vivian kissed him back, trying to convey that she understood, that she was choosing this, choosing him, despite the danger. When they broke apart, Zion took her hand and led her back to his quarters. They came together with a desperation that felt like goodbye, even though neither of them said the word. And afterward, as Vivian fell asleep in his arms, she did not notice the way his eyes stayed open, staring at the ceiling, his mind already calculating threats and contingencies. He did not notice the staff member who had been paid generously to slip a small glass vial into Vivian's apron pocket, while it hung in the staff room. Did not notice the way Jin's planted spy moved through the kitchen and added a clear, tasteless liquid to the filtered water Zion drank every morning. By sunrise, everything would begin to unravel, and neither of them would see it coming. Zion woke before dawn. As he always did, his internal clock precise as machinery, Vivian was still asleep, her body curved against his, her breathing deep and even. He allowed himself 5 minutes to just watch her, the way the early light painted her skin, the peaceful expression on her face, the trust in the way she slept in his bed without fear. 5 minutes. Then he carefully extracted himself, dressed in silence, and went to his office to handle the morning reports from his lieutenants. The water was waiting on his desk as it always was, filtered, chilled in a crystal glass. He drank half of it while reviewing overnight communications. Barely tasting it, the first twinge came 20 minutes later, sharp, wrong, a burning in his chest that had nothing to do with his condition. He ignored it. Probably stress. The elders had been pushing hard lately, and Jin's presence in the house set his nerves constantly on edge. But then it came again, stronger this time, a searing pain that spread through his veins like liquid fire, followed by a wave of nausea so intense he had to grip the edge of his desk. Poison. The realization was immediate and certain. He tried to stand, but his legs buckled. He caught himself against the wall, his vision blurring, his chest feeling like it was being crushed from the inside out. Blood flooded his mouth, dark and wrong. He managed to hit the emergency button beneath his desk before he collapsed. His guards found him 30 seconds later, convulsing on the floor, blood staining his lips and shirt. They carried him to his bed while someone called the estate physician, and Mrs. Park began a full lockdown of the property. Then the head of security entered, holding a small glass vial in a gloved hand, his expression grim. "Sir, we found this in Miss Cole's apron." Zion stared at the vial through blurring vision. Clear liquid. "Poison designed to stop the heart and leave no obvious trace, no." The word came out strangled. "She's the only one with access to your private water supply. She brings it to your office every morning, no." His voice was stronger now. But his body was betraying him, the pain intensifying, and beneath it, worse than the physical agony, his condition was returning. The ghost pain flooding back as doubt began to creep in. Every touch from the physician felt like knives. Every voice in the room scraped against his nerves like broken glass, because he had been here before. He had trusted before, and Mira had smiled while she handed him to his torturers. What if this was the same? What if Vivian was just another weapon sent by his enemies, by Jinn? What if everything, the touch, the peace, the connection, was just an elaborate and perfectly designed trap? The thought alone made the pain worse, made his condition spike, made every nerve in his body scream. "Bring her here," he said finally, his voice dead and empty. "I want to see her." They brought Vivian to him 10 minutes later. Her hair still mussed from sleep, confusion and terror fighting on her face. She rushed to his bedside and reached for him. His guard stopped her. "Don't," Zion said quietly. "Don't touch me." Vivian froze, hurt flashing across her features. "What's happening? They said you were poisoned. Are you okay? Did you do it?" The question was flat. "Clinical. Did I? What? No. Zion, what are you talking about?" The head of security held up the vial. "This was found in your possession." Vivian's face went pale. "I have never seen that before in my life. It was in the pocket of your green dress, the one found in your room." "Then someone put it there." Her voice broke. "Zion, please, you have to believe me. I would never." That's what she said too. His voice was so cold it could have frozen the sun. "The last woman I trusted, right before she handed me over to be tortured." Tears streamed down Vivian's face now. "I'm not her. I'm not whoever hurt you. I love you." The words should have moved him, should have broken through the ice forming around his heart. But all he could feel was the poison in his veins and the phantom pain returning, and the crushing weight of a betrayal he had been waiting for his entire life. His mind flashed to Mira's face, to the way she had kissed him good, by the morning before the white room, to the way she had smiled. Vivian was smiling last night. Vivian had access to his quarters, his office, his food, his water. Vivian was the only person he had allowed close in 12 years. The perfect target. The perfect weapon. "Take her to the soundproof room," he ordered. "Lock her in. Post guards. No one enters without my permission." No, Vivian struggled against the guards. But they were too strong. "Zion, please listen to me. It's a trap. Someone is setting me up. It's Jinn. It has to be Jinn." But he had already turned his face away. Unable to look at her, unable to reconcile the woman who had slept in his arms with the woman who might have just tried to kill him, they dragged her from the room, her protests echoing down the hallway until a door slammed shut, and there was only silence. Zion closed his eyes, letting the physician continue his work. The antidote was helping. His vitals were stabilizing. But the ghost pain continued to grow, spreading through his nervous system like wildfire. Now that Vivian was gone, he should have felt vindicated, protected, safe. Instead, he just felt empty. And somewhere deep in his chest, beneath the poison and the pain, a small voice whispered that he had just made a terrible mistake. 3 days passed like years. Zion recovered physically, the poison flushed from his system, his vitals returning to normal. But the ghost pain grew stronger every hour. Without Vivian nearby, the world became unbearable again. Every touch was agony. Every voice was nails on glass. Every moment felt like slowly drowning. He locked himself in his quarters. refusing visitors, refusing food, refusing everything except the medications that barely dulled the pain. The gloves went back on, but they did not help. Nothing helped. Mrs. Park brought reports twice a day, leaving them outside his door. The crime empire was fracturing. The elders were questioning his ability to lead. Jin had called an emergency council meeting to discuss what would happen if Zion stepped down. Zion read the reports and felt nothing, just the endless grinding pain of existing inside his own skin. On the third night, Jin visited. He knocked once and entered without waiting for permission. Finding Zion standing at the eastern window, staring at nothing. "Brother," Jin's voice was carefully constructed concern. But Zion heard the satisfaction beneath it. "I heard what happened, the girl. I'm sorry, I know you cared for her. Get out." "I only came, get out." Jin lingered for a moment, and Zion caught his reflection in the window, saw the ghost of a smile on his half-brother's face, saw the victory in his eyes. And in that moment, clarity struck like lightning. Jin, it had always been Jin, the poison, the evidence planted in Vivian's apron. The convenient timing, all of it was Jin's work. The investigation Zion had ordered into her background had come back completely clean. No connections to rival groups, no hidden motives, no reason to betray him except for money, and the amount Jin would have needed to pay her would have shown up in her accounts. But there was nothing, because Vivian was innocent, and he had locked her in a soundproof room for 3 days based on fabricated evidence. "Actually," Zion said, his voice still flat, but his mind suddenly razor-sharp. "Stay, I want to talk about the council meeting." Jin's smile widened. "Of course, whatever you need." They talked for 20 minutes about procedures and votes and the future of the empire. And the entire time Zion was calculating. Jin had cameras throughout the estate, he knew that now. Which meant whatever he did next had to look convincing. Had to look like the cold, ruthless Shadow King dealing with a traitor. When Jin finally left, Zion waited exactly 10 minutes. Then he called for his head of security. "I'm going to see the prisoner, alone. No guards, no cameras in the soundproof room. Complete privacy. Sir, I don't think that wasn't a request. The soundproof room was in the basement, behind 3 locked doors." Zion dismissed the guards at the entrance and used his master key to go in alone. His footsteps echoing in the concrete stairwell, his heart was pounding, not from fear, but from the desperate hope that he was not too late, that 3 days had not broken her, that she would somehow still forgive him for what he had done. He opened the final door. The room was exactly what its name suggested, walls lined with thick acoustic foam, no windows, a single overhead light that cast everything in harsh white. And against the far wall sat Vivian, her arms wrapped around her knees, her face hollow and exhausted, her wrists raw and red from where the zip ties had been. She rested her chin directly on the wounds, seemingly oblivious to the sting. When she saw him, she did not stand, did not speak, just watched him with eyes that held no hope left in them. Zion's chest cracked open. He crossed the room slowly. Every step an apology, he did not know how to speak aloud. When he reached her, he knelt, bringing himself down to her level. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. You didn't believe me." Her voice was raw from crying, from screaming, from 3 days of complete isolation. "I told you the truth, and you didn't believe me. I know. I let my past poison my present. I let fear make me cruel." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. The rejection hurt worse than any physical pain he had ever endured. "Vivian, please. I know who did this. I know you're innocent. Let me fix this." "How?" She finally looked at him, and the pain in her eyes was devastating. "How do you fix 3 days of thinking I tried to murder the man I love? 3 days of being locked in a room alone, thinking you were going to have me killed? I don't know," he admitted. "But I'll spend the rest of my life trying, if you'll let me." They sat in silence, and Zion could feel his condition screaming at him, demanding he retreat from the proximity, from the emotion. But he stayed. He would stay forever if that is what it took. Finally, Vivian spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Jin did this, didn't he? Yes. And he's watching right now. He has cameras. Not in here, but everywhere else, yes. Zion's jaw tightened, which means we need to give him a show. Make him think you're gone. Make him think he's won. Vivian's eyes widened. What are you asking me to do? Trust me. One more time. I know I don't deserve it. I know I've broken that trust. But I need you to trust me now, when it matters most. He moved closer, his hand hovering near her face, but not touching. I'm going to take you out of here, make it look like an execution. Jin's people will be watching the exterior cameras, but my most loyal guard will help. You'll be brought to a safe house, and we'll let Jin think you're gone. And then what? Then I deal with Jin permanently. But I can't do that if he knows you're alive. He'll use you against me. He'll hurt you to hurt me. His voice cracked. I can't let that happen. Vivian studied his face for a long moment. Then slowly she reached out and touched his cheek. Zion closed his eyes, feeling the peace return like a tide, feeling the ghost pain recede, feeling human again. I need you to trust me, she said quietly, not just about this, about everything. Can you do that? Yes. He turned his head. Kissing her palm, I swear it. Then get me out of here and help me prove who really did this. Zion smiled. Genuine for perhaps the first time in days, he stood, helping her to her feet, then pulled her close. His arms wrapping around her, his face buried in her hair. I love you, he whispered. I should have said it before, should have believed you, but I love you, and I will never doubt you again. Vivian's arms tightened around him. I love you too, even when you're an idiot. He laughed, a sound he had not made in years. Then pulled back, his expression growing serious. What happens next is going to be hard. You'll have to play dead, stay hidden, trust people you've never met. Can you do that? Yes, but Zion. She looked up at him, her eyes fierce. When this is over, when Jin is dealt with, I want him to know it was me. I want him to see my face and know he failed. Done. He kissed her forehead, then stepped back, his expression shifting, becoming the Shadow King again, cold, ruthless, controlled. Now scream, make it loud, make it convincing. Vivian understood immediately. She opened her mouth and screamed, a sound of pure terror that carried through the concrete walls to the guards standing outside. Zion grabbed her throat gently, carefully, his thumb positioned so it looked brutal on the hallway camera, but applied no real pressure. He held on just enough to look convincing. Vivian clawed at his hands, her acting perfect. You poisoned me, he said loudly, his voice carrying, you betrayed me, and now you die. He pulled his gun from his holster, pressed it against her temple. And Vivian went completely limp in his arms, trusting him completely. The gunshot was deafening in the small space. The bullet buried itself in the acoustic foam, 2 inches from where her head had been, close enough that the flash singed the edge of her hair, close enough that anyone listening would absolutely believe it had found its target. Vivian collapsed, her body perfectly slack, and Zion caught her, lowering her gently to the ground. He knelt beside her, his hand quickly checking for the pulse that was still beating strong and steady. Then he stood, his face a mask of cold satisfaction, and opened the door. His head of security stood outside, along with his most loyal guard, a man named Thomas, who had served his family for 20 years. It's done, Zion said flatly. Thomas, dispose of the body quietly. I don't want questions. Thomas bowed, understanding flickering in his eyes. Yes, sir. The other guard hesitated. Sir, shouldn't we? Are you questioning me? No, sir, of course not. Good, leave us. The guard left. Thomas entered the room and carefully lifted Vivian, wrapping her in black canvas, her eyes closed, her breathing so shallow it was barely perceptible, perfect. As Thomas carried her past, Zion did not look, did not allow himself a single moment of reaction that might give away the truth. He just stood there, cold and empty, while the woman he loved was carried out of the room like a corpse. When the door closed, Zion finally allowed himself to move. He leaned against the wall, his hands shaking, his chest tight. He had done it. The first part of the plan was complete. But as he climbed the stairs back to the main house, he felt the ghost pain returning, felt the silence slipping away, felt the isolation closing in again like a fist around his throat. 3 days without her had been agony. Now he was facing weeks, maybe months, until he could take down Jin and bring her back. He just had to survive until then. In the guest wing, Jin stood at his window with a glass of whiskey, watching through the security feed as Thomas loaded a body bag into an unmarked van. He smiled, satisfied. The anchor was cut. The ship was sinking. Soon the Empire would be his. He did not notice the way Thomas glanced at the camera, did not notice the way the old guard's expression held something that looked exactly like contempt, did not notice that he had already lost, even though he believed completely that he had won. The safe house was a gray concrete box tucked into the mountains 40 miles from the estate. One room, one barred window, a cot that smelled like disinfectant. Thomas had driven her there in the back of a refrigerated van. Her body, wrapped in canvas, like she really was, a corpse. The cold seeping into her bones until she could not feel her fingers. When he finally let her out, his weathered face was apologetic. "I'm sorry, Miss Cole, but if anyone sees you alive, they'll kill you for real, and they'll kill him too." Vivian nodded, her throat still raw from screaming, "How long?" "As long as it takes." Thomas handed her a basic phone with one number already programmed in. "Only call if it's life or death. He can't know you're reaching out. Jin has people everywhere." Then he left. And Vivian was alone. The first night she paced, the room was maybe 12 feet across, the walls pressing in like a slow fist. She counted her steps, 20, 3 from wall to wall, and she thought about Zion in that basement, believing she had betrayed him. The look in his eyes when he had ordered her locked away had been worse than any physical pain she had ever endured. She understood why he doubted. She understood the scars Mira had left, but understanding did not make it hurt any less. The second night she tried to sleep, but could not. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt his hand around her throat, felt the cold press of the gun against her temple, felt the split second of pure animal terror before she had forced herself to trust him completely. He could have killed her, could have decided she was guilty and ended it right there, but he had not. That had to mean something. By the third night, she started watching the news on the small television Thomas had left. The Empire was in chaos. Zion had retreated completely from public view. The elders were calling emergency meetings. And Jin was everywhere, giving interviews, making statements, positioning himself as the calm and stabilizing force. "My brother is grieving," Jin told a reporter, his face perfectly solemn. "The betrayal of someone he trusted has taken a severe toll, but the syndicate will endure. I'll make sure of it." Vivian threw the remote at the screen. It bounced off harmlessly, but the rage felt good, cleansing. She would make him pay for the poison, for the frame job, for every single second of pain he had caused Zion. She just had to survive long enough to see it happen. By the 7th night, the isolation was starting to fracture her. She caught herself talking to the walls, having full conversations with imaginary versions of Marcus and her mother. She started rationing the canned food Thomas had left, not because she was running out, but because the act of eating felt wrong when Zion was suffering. The phone never rang. On the 10th night, she broke. Vivian pulled up the news again, searching for any mention of Zion. What she found made her blood turn to ice. A grainy photograph taken from a distance. Zion being helped into a car by 2 guards. His body hunched, his face gray. The headline read, "Shadow King's health deteriorating. Sources say Empire's leadership in question." She stared at the image. Her hands shaking, he looked like he was dying, like the life was bleeding out of him one day at a time. Like a man whose soul had already left and his body just had not caught up yet, because he was. Without her, the ghost pain was consuming him. She knew it with the same certainty she knew her own name. Vivian looked at the phone. Thomas had said only call if it's life or death. This was life or death, just not hers. She dialed the only number. It rang twice before Thomas answered. His voice sharp. "What's wrong?" "He's dying.
I saw the photo. He can't do this alone. Her voice cracked.
I need to come back. Absolutely not. Jin has people watching every entrance to the estate. The moment you show your face, then I won't show my face. There has to be a way. She was pacing again, her mind racing. What about the event? I heard on the news that Jin is throwing some kind of formal gathering. Silence. Then carefully, you want to walk into a syndicate event where half the guests are Jin's allies, and the other half are looking for any excuse to challenge Zion's authority. Yes, that's suicide. Then I'll die. The words came out flat and certain, but I'm not letting him suffer alone anymore. He needs a silence, and I'm the only one who can give it to him. More silence. Then Thomas exhaled slowly. I'll see what I can do. But if this goes wrong, we all die. You understand that? I understand. Good, stay by the phone. He hung up. Vivian sat on the cot, her heart pounding. She thought about the night of the storm, the way Zion had held her wrist like she was the only thing anchoring him to the earth. The way he had whispered, "Don't let go," like a prayer. She would not let go, not now, not ever, even if it killed her. 2 days later, Thomas arrived with a garment bag and a plan. The event is tomorrow night. Formal. Masks required. Jin is calling it a night of renewal for the Empire. Thomas's expression was grim. I can get you in as part of the catering staff, but you'll be on your own once you're inside. I've looped the security feed at the service entrance for 10 minutes. That gets you in, but once. You're on the floor. I can't protect you if someone recognizes you. They won't. Vivian unzipped the bag. Inside was a sleek black server's uniform and a gold mask that covered most of her face. What about Zion? Will he be there? Jin is forcing him to attend, a show of unity. Thomas's jaw tightened. But Miss Cole, you need to understand something. Mr. Seo is not well. The past 2 weeks have broken him in ways I have never seen. He's taking medication just to stand upright. If you approach him, and he doesn't immediately recognize you, if he thinks you're a threat, he'll know me. She said it with more confidence than she felt. He'll know. Thomas studied her for a long moment, then nodded. There's a car waiting. We leave in an hour. Vivian changed quickly, pulling her hair into a tight bun, securing the mask. When she looked in the small mirror, she barely recognized herself. Good, that was the point. The drive back to the estate felt endless. Her stomach twisted with nerves. But beneath that was something else, anticipation, hope, the knowledge that in a few hours she would see him again, even if it destroyed them both. The estate had been transformed into something from a fever dream, black silk draped from the ceiling like storm clouds. Gold chandeliers poured light like honey, and everywhere, on every surface and in every corner, were candles. Hundreds of them, casting shadows that moved and breathed. Vivian followed the other catering staff through the service entrance. Her head down, her movements efficient. No one gave her a second glance. She was invisible, a ghost. The main ballroom was filling with guests, men in sharp suits and women in gowns that cost more than cars, all wearing elaborate masks, gold, silver, black lace, jeweled feathers. The air smelled like expensive perfume and barely concealed danger. At the far end of the room, on a raised platform, sat Jin. He looked like a king holding court, his mask simple black, somehow making him look more predatory than ever. And beside him, in a chair that might as well have been a throne, sat Zion. Vivian's breath caught. He wore all black as always, his mask silver and elegant, but even from across the room she could see the wrongness in him. The way he held himself too still, like movement, cost him something. The way his gloved hands gripped the arms of the chair like he was holding on for dear life. He was dying slowly, visibly, and no one around him seemed to care. Vivian grabbed a tray of champagne glasses and began moving through the crowd. Her head down, her movements smooth, listening to fragments of conversation floating around her. Heard he stepped down from operations. Jin will be formally announced as successor. Tragic, really, but the Empire needs strong leadership. Each word was a knife. These people were vultures circling a man they had once feared, waiting for him to fall so they could pick his bones clean. Vivian's grip on the tray tightened. She forced herself to breathe. To stay calm, she could not help Zion if she got herself caught. She worked her way closer to the platform. Weaving through clusters of guests, a string quartet played something haunting in the corner. Other servers in identical uniforms moved like shadows. And through it all, Vivian kept her eyes on Zion. He had not moved, had not spoken. Just sat there like a beautiful broken statue while Jin laughed with guests and accepted congratulations. Finally, she was close enough. 10 feet, then 5. A server passed between them, and Vivian moved with the practiced ease of someone who had spent years being invisible in wealthy spaces. She slipped past a group of men discussing money, past a woman dripping in diamonds, until she was standing directly in front of the platform. Zion's eyes were fixed on the middle distance, seeing nothing. The mask covered most of his face, but she could see his jaw. The sharp line of it, the tension in it, could see the slight tremor in his gloved hands. She had one chance. One moment before someone noticed her standing too long in one spot. Vivian set down her tray, pulled a small card from her pocket. Blank except for 7 words written in her handwriting. "I am still your silence, trust me." She stepped forward, her heart hammering, and reached for his hand. The moment her fingers touched his glove, Zion's entire body went rigid. His head snapped toward her, his eyes visible through the mask, widening with shock. She pressed the card into his palm. Their eyes met, and she saw the exact moment he recognized her. His lips parted, his grip on her hand tightened like a vice. But before he could speak, before he could do anything that would give her away, Vivian pulled back and melted into the crowd. She did not look back, did not stop moving, just grabbed another tray and kept circulating, her pulse racing, her entire body electric with the feeling of his touch. He knew she was alive. Behind her, she heard the sound of a chair scraping back. Heard Jin's voice, sharp with concern. "Brother, are you unwell?" "No." Zion's voice was stronger than it had been in weeks. "Clear, alive, I'm fine, better than fine." Vivian risked a glance back. Zion was standing now, his posture straight, his presence suddenly filling the entire room in a way it had not minutes before. He was scanning the crowd. Searching, she turned away before he could find her again. But she felt his gaze like a physical thing. Sweeping across the room, hunting, the Viper was awake. For the next hour, Vivian played her role. She refilled glasses, cleared plates, stayed invisible, but she watched everything, watched as Zion moved through the crowd with renewed energy, speaking to guests, reminding people with every conversation why they had once feared him. Watched as Jin's expression grew tighter, more controlled. He had expected his brother to be weak and pliable. Instead, Zion was reclaiming the room one interaction at a time. Near midnight, Jin called for attention. The music stopped. The crowd gathered. "Thank you all for coming," Jin said, his voice smooth as oil. "Tonight we celebrate the Syndicate's resilience, its strength, and its future." He gestured toward Zion. "My brother has asked me to assume a more active role in operations while he focuses on his health. Effective immediately, I'll be a no." The single word cut through the room like a blade. Zion stepped forward, removing his mask. His face was still pale, still marked by exhaustion, but his eyes were sharp and focused and completely alive. "I appreciate your concern, brother, but I'm not stepping down, not now, not ever." The room went silent. Every single eye turned to the 2 brothers standing on the platform, separated by 3 feet and a lifetime of betrayal. Jin's smile never wavered. "Zion, you're not well. Everyone can see I'm well enough." Zion's voice dropped lower. "More dangerous, and I'm not going anywhere. So whatever plans you've made, whatever moves you've set in motion, end them. Now, brother." He paused. "I know what you did." The words were quiet, but they carried through the silent room like a gunshot. "The poison, the evidence, all of it, and I'm giving you one chance to walk away. Take it." Jin's mask finally cracked. His smile turned brittle. "You're delusional. Grief has broken you. Everyone here can see it. Can they?" Zion looked out at the crowd. And Vivian saw several guests immediately look away, unwilling to meet his eyes. Or do they see a man who's done letting his enemies think he's weak? The tension was suffocating. Then Jin laughed, softly,
Very well. If you want to play games, brother, let's play. He pulled a small device from his pocket.
A remote. I had this installed as a security measure for situations like this. He pressed the button.
The sound started as a low hum, barely perceptible, then it rose, a high-frequency shriek that felt like needles being driven into the skull. The champagne glasses on the tables began to vibrate, the chandeliers swayed, guests started screaming. People dropped to their knees. Hands clamped over their ears. Women in silk gowns collapsed against marble columns. Men in $1,000 suits bent double, but it was Zion who fell hardest. He went down like he had been shot. His body convulsing, blood immediately streaming from his nose, his hands clawing at his head, trying to block out the sound that was drilling into his hypersensitive nervous system like a bullet. Vivian understood immediately, a sonic weapon, designed to overload the senses. For someone with Zion's condition, it was pure torture. On the platform, Jin stood completely untouched, noise, canceling earbuds visible in his ears. He looked down at his brother with cold satisfaction. I told you you're too weak to lead. Vivian dropped her tray. The sound of shattering crystal was lost in the chaos. She ripped off her mask and ran. She sprinted across the ballroom, dodging fallen bodies, overturned chairs. The debris of full panic, her vision tunneled, her entire world narrowed to the sight of Zion on the floor. Bleeding, dying, a guard tried to stop her. She drove her elbow into his throat and kept moving. The sound was getting worse. Louder, a physical pressure that made her teeth ache, but it did not stop her, could not stop her, because pain was just information. And she had learned a very long time ago how to ignore information that did not matter. She reached Zion and dropped to her knees beside him. His eyes were rolled back, his body locked in a full seizure. He was choking on his own blood. Hey. She grabbed his face with both hands, forcing him to focus. Look at me, look at me. His eyes found hers, recognition flared, then confusion. Then terror, not for himself, but for her. His lips moved, forming words she could not hear over the shrieking. Run, not a chance. She pulled him against her chest, wrapping her entire body around his, and clamped her hands firmly over his ears. Using her own flesh to seal out the sound, and something impossible happened. The noise did not stop. The frequency did not change, but Zion's seizure began to ease. His breathing steadied. The blood flow slowed. Like her body was absorbing the worst of it. Like she was a biological filter, taking the damage before it could fully reach him. Zion stared up at her, his expression stunned. How, later, she helped him sit up, keeping her arms around him. Can you stand? He nodded, and together they rose. The ballroom was carnage, bodies everywhere. Jin still standing on the platform, his face shifting from triumph to confusion as he watched his brother get to his feet, alive, protected by a woman who was supposed to be dead. That's not possible, Jin said. She's dead. I watched. You watched what I wanted you to watch. Zion's voice was steady. Strong, he kept one arm around Vivian, holding her close. You always underestimated me, brother, and you definitely underestimated her. Jin's hand moved toward his jacket. Gun, Vivian was faster. The small knife she had tucked into her uniform was in her hand before Jin's fingers reached his holster. She hurled it with perfect precision, a skill learned in the Bronx where survival meant knowing how to fight in ways that were not always pretty. The blade buried itself in Jin's shoulder. He stumbled back with a scream, and Zion moved. He crossed the platform in 3 strides, grabbed the remote from Jin's hand, and crushed it under his heel. The shrieking stopped instantly. The silence that followed was deafening. Zion stood over his brother, his chest heaving, blood still staining his face. When he spoke, his voice was dead and empty. You tried to break me once, in that white room. You failed then, and you failed now. Jin clutched his bleeding shoulder, his eyes wild. The elders will never accept her. She's a liability, a weakness. No. Zion reached down and hauled Jin up by his collar, bringing them face to face. She is my anchor, my silence, my salvation. He shoved Jin away, and you're finished. Guards poured into the ballroom. Zion's guards, loyal ones, with Thomas leading them, armed and efficient. They surrounded the platform. "Weapons drawn, take him," Zion ordered. "Lock him in the east wing. No one sees him without my permission." As they dragged Jin away, he was screaming. Threats, curses, promises of revenge, but his voice faded as the doors closed, leaving only the sound of guests slowly regaining consciousness. Zion turned to Vivian. For a moment, they just stared at each other, breathing hard, alive. Then he pulled her into his arms. The embrace was crushing, desperate, his face buried in her neck, his entire body shaking. "I thought I'd killed you," he whispered. "Every night for 2 weeks. I thought I'd put a bullet in your head." "I know." She held him just as tightly, her fingers tangling in his hair. "But I'm here, I'm alive, and I'm not going anywhere." He pulled back just enough to look at her. His hands framing her face, the sound. "It should have incapacitated you, but you didn't even flinch." Vivian hesitated. This was the moment, the secret she had kept her entire life. "I have a condition, congenital insensitivity to pain. I can't feel pain, never could." Zion's eyes widened. "That's why you don't hurt me. Your nervous system doesn't process physical pain, so you don't carry it. That silence, it breaks the feedback loop. It quiets everything else. I think so, yes?" She touched his face gently, her thumb brushing away the blood on his cheek. "We're perfect opposites. You feel too much. I feel nothing. Together we balance. Perfect opposites," he repeated. Wonder bleeding into his voice. Then he kissed her. It was different from before. Not desperate or testing, but claiming. His hands moved through her hair, down her back, holding her like she was the most precious thing in existence. And Vivian kissed him back with everything she had, pouring 2 weeks of fear and loneliness and love into the contact. When they finally broke apart, the ballroom was empty except for Thomas, who was politely looking anywhere else. "Sir," Thomas said carefully, "the elders are requesting an emergency meeting. They want an explanation." Zion's jaw tightened. Then he looked down at Vivian. "Will you stand with me? Always." The emergency council meeting was held in the estate's formal conference room. Dark wood, darker intentions. 12 elders sat around a table that had witnessed generations of empire decisions. Their faces carved from stone, their eyes calculating. Zion entered with Vivian at his side. He had changed into a fresh suit, black on black, but refused to clean the blood from his face. Let them see it. Let them see what Jin had done. Vivian wore the green dress from their first dinner. Zion had insisted, "Let them know exactly who you are to me." He had said, "No more hiding." The elders stared as they took their seats at the head of the table. An older woman with silver hair spoke first, her voice cold. "Seo Zion, you have brought chaos to this house. Your brother claims you've lost your mind, that you've compromised the Empire's security for a woman who poisoned you. My brother is a liar." Zion's voice was steady. "He poisoned me, he framed her, and then he tried to murder half the Empire's leadership tonight with a sonic weapon because I refused to hand him power." Murmurs around the table. The woman leaned forward. "Do you have proof?" "I do." Thomas entered carrying a laptop. He set it on the table and opened the files. Security footage filled the screen. Jin's planted spy placing the vial in Vivian's apron. Audio recordings of Jin ordering the attack. Financial records showing payments to the Empire's enemies. The room went silent as they watched. When the evidence finished, the woman sat back, her expression unreadable. "And the woman, what is she to you? Everything." Zion reached over and took Vivian's hand, bare skin on bare skin. In full view of the entire council, several elders gasped. "For 12 years, I could not touch another human being without agony. Then I met her. She is the only person alive whose touch does not cause me pain. She saved my life during a seizure. She stood by me when I wrongly accused her. And tonight, she shielded me from a weapon designed to kill me." "A weakness," another elder said. "Inexploitable vulnerability. No." Zion's grip on Vivian's hand tightened. "She is my strength, and I'm making this clear right now. She is under my protection. Anyone who threatens her threatens me, and I don't take threats lightly." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. This was the Shadow King, the man they remembered, the man who had built an empire on precision and ruthlessness. The silver-haired woman studied them both for a long moment. Then she nodded. The evidence against Jin is compelling. We will convene a formal review, but Zion, understand this. If she becomes a liability, the council will act. She won't. He stood, pulling Vivian up with him. We're done here. They left the conference room hand in hand. Behind them, the elders erupted into heated discussion. But Zion did not stop, did not look back, just kept walking until they reached his private quarters. The moment the door closed, he backed her gently against it, his forehead resting against hers. I'm sorry for doubting you, for locking you away, for every second of pain I caused. You were protecting yourself, I understand. It's not an excuse. His hands cupped her face, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. But I swear to you, Vivian Cole, I will spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me, that I will never doubt you again, Zion. Her voice was raw. Stripped of everything except the truth. I love you. I loved you when I thought you were going to have me killed. I loved you every minute I was gone, and I will love you until the day I die. One tear slid down his cheek, just one, but it was enough. I love you too, even when you're an idiot, he laughed. That rare, beautiful sound, and kissed her. This time there was no desperation, no testing, just certainty. Just the knowledge that they had survived hell and come out the other side together. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with something that made her breath catch. Stay with me, not as my employee, not as my shield, but as my partner, my equal. He paused, my wife. Vivian's heart stopped. Are you asking me to marry you? I'm asking you to rule beside me. His voice was steady. Sure, the empire needs a queen. I need you, so yes, I'm asking. She should have been scared. Should have thought about the danger, the violence, the impossible world he lived in, but all she felt was certainty. Yes, he kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands moving through her hair, down her back. They stumbled toward the bed, shedding the armor they had built around their hearts. When they came together, it was different from before. Slower, more deliberate, he mapped every part of her skin with his hands and his lips, learning her with the complete focus he brought to everything. And she did the same, tracing the scars on his chest, the tension in his shoulders, the places that made him shudder. You're so warm, he murmured against her throat. You're always so warm, and you're always so cold. She pulled him closer. We balance, perfect opposites. They moved together in the darkness, finding a rhythm that felt like coming home. And when they finally crested together, Zion held her gaze the entire time, his eyes saying everything words could not. Afterward, they lay tangled in black silk sheets, her head on his chest, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. What happens to Jin? Vivian asked quietly. The review will handle him, but he won't walk free. Zion's voice was cold. He tried to take everything from me. There are consequences for that. Will they exile him, if he's lucky? His arm tightened. But I don't care what happens to him, as long as you're safe. Vivian traced patterns on his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her palm. I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me now. Good. He pressed a kiss to her hair. Because I'm never letting you go again. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other, the weight of survival and love pressing them together. And for the first time in 12 years, Zion slept without nightmares. The formal review took 3 days. The evidence was damning. Jin was stripped of his title, his assets seized, and exiled to a remote location under constant surveillance. He would spend the rest of his life in comfortable imprisonment, alive, but powerless. Exile is worse than death for a man like Jin. Powerless, controlled, forgotten, it was a mercy he did not deserve. 1 year later, the wedding was a spectacle. The estate was transformed again, but this time with white silk and flowers instead of black and gold. The guest list included empire leadership from across the globe, all coming to witness the impossible. The Shadow King taking a queen, Vivian walked down the aisle in a dress that made her feel like a warrior princess. White lace over her shoulders, a flowing skirt, and a neckline that dipped just enough to show strength. Marcus wheeled beside her, giving her away with tears streaming freely. Her mother sat in the front row. Healthy for the first time in years, thanks to the medical care, Zion had insisted on providing the moment they were safe. At the altar, Zion waited, all-black suit, his gloves conspicuously absent. When Vivian reached him, he took her hands, bare skin on bare skin, and smiled. The ceremony was brief, old traditions mixed with modern vows. And when they were finally pronounced married, Zion cupped her face and kissed her like they were the only two people in the entire world. The reception was held in the same ballroom where they had survived Jin's attack, but tonight there were no weapons. No threats, just music and laughter, and the sight of a man who had lived 12 years without touch, dancing with his wife. Their hands clasped, their bodies close. Later, in the privacy of their quarters, Zion removed her dress slowly. Reverently, "I still can't believe you're real," he murmured against her shoulder, "that you're mine. I'm real, I'm yours." She turned in his arms, her hands moving up his chest, unbuttoning his shirt, "And you're mine, always." He kissed her neck, her collarbone, the curve of her shoulder, until the world ends and beyond. They made love with the kind of tenderness that only comes from surviving hell together. And afterward, as Vivian drifted toward sleep, she heard him whisper, "You gave me back my humanity, my silence, my ability to feel something other than pain." She turned to look at him, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "You gave me a reason to stop hiding, a place where I matter, a man worth fighting for, perfect opposites, perfect partners." He pulled her closer, his arm draped across her waist, and they fell asleep to the sound of each other's breathing. Outside, the estate gleamed under moonlight. Inside, the Shadow King and his queen slept in peace, their bodies intertwined, their futures stretched before them like an open road. They had survived betrayal, poison, exile, and war. They had found each other in the darkness and built something unbreakable from the ruins. And in the morning they would wake and rule together.